traveled more than an hour? Just raise your hand. Okay, so good, handful of people. How about, who traveled more than 5 hours to get here? All right, so we've got California represented, Colorado. And you guys were all together over there. All right, I'm gonna give a hat away, but I don't know if I just throw it in there and let you guys, wrestle for it. What could I ask that would divide the difference there? Who did you guys fly? And then rented a car? Who drove? Okay, there you go. I almost caught the candle there. It's interesting. We did a lot of driving growing up. As your family gets larger, there's times when flying is practical and affordable, and then there's times when it just simply isn't. And I remember multiple times driving across the country, grew up in Colorado, and driving across to the East Coast or up to Canada as my parents had opportunities to speak or do different things. And if you've ever driven with kids or with a family in the car, at some point in time, and it doesn't even have to be a long drive, right? It can be even just a shorter drive. What do you end up hearing at some point from the back seat? Are we there yet, right? Are we there yet? I mean, the cliche, driving a long distance, are we there yet? To which you respond, not yet. What's the next question? Are we there yet? Are we there yet? After the are we there yet question, if they don't ask that one again, and you say not yet, what do they ask next? How much longer? How much longer? Okay, are we there yet? Clearly, we're not. No. Well, how much longer till we get there? The question we're going to be digging into today, and if you weren't here last night, we're kind of digging into this idea. The theme is leading the witness, how God uses questions to lead his disciples or his witnesses towards the life he longs for them. And so we're looking at Old Testament questions where God asks questions of his people, not often because he doesn't know the answer, but because he wants to help them, lead them, grow them. And so the question that we're going to look at today is that question, not, are we there yet? Though that would be a good one, but God doesn't ask that one. But the question, how much longer? How long? How long? That question, how long or how much longer, it's tied into the are we there yet question because the how long question has an end in sight, right? How long means I know I'm going somewhere. There's an end in sight. How long till we get there? Like to the goal. How long? And it could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. Over Christmas break, my son Judah, from like week one, kept saying, how long till I have to go back to school? He wanted it to be longer. He's not like, oh, I hope we're almost there. He was like, how long? We're like, buddy, you've got like a month. A couple days later, how long? How long? You've got like 3 weeks. How long? And it's getting shorter, but he wanted it to be longer. He had a goal in mind. The goal is school. It was a goal he didn't want to go to, but he wanted to know, how much time do I have? How long? Some other goals are things that you want, driving somewhere, getting somewhere. My wife, Sarah, was supposed to be here this weekend, and she was in Denver for a hockey tournament for my son this last weekend, and it just dumped snow in Colorado. You guys are kind of lacking in the snow department from what I've heard here. I've never been to Minnesota this time of year, but I've heard it's usually a lot more snow. Well, Colorado was also lacking in snow. We were really low. Ski resorts weren't doing well, and last weekend it dumped. In my town, we got it says on the news, 61 inches in 8 days. That's a lot of snow. 61 inches at the ski resort. And my wife was stuck in Denver, and she was at somebody's house, thankfully, not in a hotel, and she was supposed to drive home, but they closed the mountain pass that leads into our town. And she kept checking. How much longer? How much longer till they open the road? How much longer? Day one, they didn't open it. Day two, how much longer? How much longer? Didn't open it. Day three. Finally, they opened a route she could get a long ways around. She came around, she got home, realizing I have one day before I need to go back to the airport to fly to Minnesota. But they closed the pass again. And there was this, how much longer till I can go? And she didn't come. It never came. The how much longer question sometimes is a little bit more serious. Right now, one of the questions we're kind of working through as a family is how much longer can my parents stay in their home? My parents are, getting older, and my mom has some vision challenges, and my dad's had some health challenges, and so they live alone in a house. And that question we're asking with my brothers: how much longer? How much longer can they handle, a house alone? How much longer should they be driving? Some of you guys have been in that place. Maybe you're in that place where you've had to ask those questions. At some point in time, there's an end point. Like for my parents, there's a point where it's like they just can't live by themselves on a mountain, without much help. How much longer until we need to figure out something different? There's an end point in sight. Maybe it's how much longer till I get consistent work. How much longer until my wandering child comes back to the Lord? That how much longer question often is sitting there, and very often it just kind of sits underneath the surface asking, how much longer, how much longer, how much longer? When is that goal going to happen? When is that end going to come? At Timberline, we have, about 40 to 42, depending on the year, 35 students who come through, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, generally speaking. And one of the things that we hear every year, and I would say I don't know if it's grown. I think people are more prone to talk about it, but is people's wrestling with pornography and struggle with pornography addictions. And if there's one thing I feel like I hear as I talk to the guys, and I think of some guys I got real close to, and we just have conversations, with the things they're wrestling with, that question would come up over and over again. How much longer? How much longer? How long do I have to keep dealing with this? How much longer? And this almost kind of feeling like I'm helpless. I don't know if you've known somebody, or maybe you've been in that place. Maybe it's not pornography. Maybe it's another addiction. Maybe it's something else. And you wonder, how much longer till I'm past this? This can be in the past, and it's not a present tense issue. How much longer? And to be honest, I have a hard time sometimes knowing how to answer that question, right? As I'm connecting with a guy and, man, how much longer? What do I need to do? Give me some help. What's the steps? How much longer am I going to be wrestling with this? And it's not easy. Our question that God asks today is that question, how much longer, or how long? It's going to take place in the book of Numbers, and we're going to kind of work our way into it. I want to give you just a little context. Numbers 13 and 14 is where we're going to spend most of our time. Israel, if you remember, Sam last night had talked about Moses, and Moses at the burning bush, and God was calling Moses to go to Egypt and to proclaim to Pharaoh to let God's people go. And as Sam explained, Moses was like, but what about my mouth? I'm a stutterer or slow speech or whatever he says, and God asks the question, our question for last night is, who made man's mouth? Who made man's mouth? And I love, as Sam brought up the point, that it wasn't that God was like, come on, Moses, you can do this. Moses was right. He couldn't do it. He said, send someone else. I can't do it. And he was right. He couldn't do it. But God never said he was supposed to do it. God said, I will do it through you. And so for him to say, send someone else was actually like a disobedient, not trusting what God had promised. Well, if you know the story, Moses ends up going. And in powerful ways, God uses Moses. And you see clearly it's the hand of God using Moses to free the Israelites from Egypt. And there's these 10 plagues, and they come on Egypt. And God is just powerfully kind of attacking the gods of Egypt and the ideology in Egypt. And eventually Pharaoh says, The people can go. Let them go. And again, you guys know the story. They cross the Red Sea. As they're being chased by the Egyptians, the Red Sea crushes over the top of them, and they are free to journey to a place that God has promised. He said, I'm going to take you to a land flowing with milk and honey, this land of Canaan. And he takes them on this journey through the wilderness. And on this journey, God's providing food for them in this form of manna. It's like bread falling from the sky. He provides birds to eat. He provides water to drink. At times, Israel was lacking faith, and they wrestled through, how can we trust God? And is he providing for us? Do we want to go back? They got to Mount Sinai, where Moses was given the 10 Commandments, and they made a golden calf, and there was a huge problem there, obviously, with the people of Israel. But God, in his grace and his mercy, continued working and walking with them, and he brought them from Mount Sinai, from Horeb, and they come to a place called Kadesh Barnea, right on the outskirts of the promised land, this land flowing with milk and honey. And here they are, they're ready to go. They're gonna go in, and it says in chapter 13, verse 1, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send out for yourself men, that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I'm going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of their fathers' tribes, everyone a leader among them. So here they are, they're gathering together, they're on the edge of the land, and they're in this Kadesh Barnea, and God says, okay, send out somebody from every tribe into the land. And you can imagine the people thinking, here it is. We've been waiting for this. We were in Egypt, slaves. We've been taken out. We've been through all this stuff. Yeah, we made some mistakes along the way. Yeah, we grumbled a little bit along the way, but God stayed with us, and now he's bringing us to the place he promised. Here we are in the land. Send these guys out to check it out. It's interesting because Deuteronomy gives us a little bit of a nugget into what actually happened here. You know, you kind of have I think there was that song as a kid, 12 men went to spy on Canaan, like hand motions. You guys remember that one? 10 were bad, 2 were good. I remember singing that song, but there's a little nugget in Deuteronomy that we don't see and we don't notice, and it's fascinating what kind of led up to this sending out the people into the land, the spies. Deuteronomy chapter 1, verse 21, it says, verse 21, see, the Lord your God has placed the land before you. Okay, here they are on the edge of the land. Go up, take possession as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has spoken to you. Do not fear or be dismayed. That makes sense. Here you are, go. You're going to go into the land. I'm going to give it to you. Go up, possess the land. Verse 22, look at this. It's fascinating. Then all of you approached me. This is Moses speaking. He had said, go into the land. That's what God had commanded. Then all of you approached me and said, let us send men before us, that they may search out the land for us and bring back to us word of the way by which we should go up, and the cities which we shall enter. Did you know that idea was not God's idea initially? It was man's. God brought him to the land and said, okay, you're going to go in, I'm going to give it to you, you're going to possess the land. And the people of Israel, the people came up to Moses and said, hey, that's great, but can we go and just check it out first so we know kind of what way we're going to go and what cities we're going to go in? Last night, Sam talked about your Jesus GPS. How a lot of times the way we think our relationship should work with God, with Christ, is that we've kind of got this Jesus GPS where we're like, okay, tell me where I'm supposed to go. I want to know the destination. I want to know the goal. And sadly, the way we think about it is that it's like so that I can kind of decide if I'm going to be on board. It's like if I get my GPS, I get my iPhone up and I type in a location. Hey, I want to travel here. Here's the destination. And then, it gives you like some options of which direction you want to go. Hey, there's like 4 different routes. And a lot of times I'll look at that and I'll be like, okay, one has a toll, one's a highway, one's kind of like a windy mountain road. And I kind of evaluate that and think, okay, which one do I want? Which route do I want? Which one seems like the best to fit my needs to get to that destination? Or I might look at all of them and say, I don't actually like where I'm going. I'm not going to go. And I think sometimes that's how we are with God. We say, God, where are you taking me? Where do you want me to go? This Jesus GPS. And we start looking for options. What are the options? How do you want us to take us? We want to map it out. To some degree, we want to be in control of what he's doing. And it almost seems like that's what happens with Israel right here. God says, I'm going to take you into the land. He doesn't give them a lot of details, other than it's a good land, flowing with milk and honey. You might say, what does that even mean? Flowing with milk and honey? It's like Candyland or something like that. Flowing with milk and honey, what that probably means is, milk. Where do you get milk from? Cows, sheep, goats. And so if it is flowing with milk, it probably means it's a great land to have livestock. How about honey? Where do you get honey? Bees. What do you have for honey to make bees? Sorry, what do you have to have for bees to make honey? Flowers. And so probably what that means, flowing with honey, is not like the rivers are like flowing with honey. It probably means there's flowers, there's plants, orchards, trees, fruiting plants that have flowers that turn into fruit. And so this is a land where your livestock can grow, and there's good growth and fruiting plants that would produce, fruit or whatnot, and then obviously bees and honey. And so it's a good land. He tells them it's a good land, and then it's like they're like, that's awesome, let's go, but let's check the navigation real quick. Can you send us in? And God says, okay. Moses said it seemed good to him. Again, it's kind of an interesting thing. Was that God's plan? Was it not God's plan? We don't know. God agrees. And so he sends the 12. I'm going to read a little bit of a longer section. You kind of know what goes on here, but I just want to read through it. Verse 17 of chapter 13, it says, when Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, he said to them, go up into the Negev, the wilderness, then go into the hill country, see what the land is like, check it out. And whether the people who live in it are strong or weak, whether they're few or many. Even as I'm reading it, because we know what happens, I start wondering, how helpful is that? Is that beneficial? To know? Strong, weak, few, many? If you're fully committed to going, then it's probably helpful information. If in your heart and in your mind there's a question of should I go, it could be very detrimental. Verse 19, how is the land in which they live? Is it good or is it bad? How are the cities in which they live? Are they like open camps or with fortifications? How is the land? Is it fat? Is it lean? Are there trees in it or not? Make an effort then to get some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. Verse 21, so they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob at Lebo-Hamath. When they had gone up into the Negev, they came to Hebron, and at Himon and Shishai and Talmai, and the descendants of Anak were there. These are descendants of the Nephilim, which were like giants. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Verse 23, then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and from there they cut a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two men with some of the pomegranates and the figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster with which the sons of Israel cut down from there. And so here they go through the land, they're exploring it, and it's a great land. It's beautiful. It's got some pretty big people. It's got some cities. But they go into detail to talk about this cluster of grapes that they held over a pole with two people. And I don't know, like as a kid, I thought maybe the grapes were like massive, and maybe they were, I don't know. Or was it just a huge cluster, like, just a big cluster where they're all together? Whatever it was good. It was great. They bring it back to Israel. Verse 25, they're there for 40 days. Verse 25, when they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Look at this stuff. Takes two people to carry this cluster of grapes. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey. You were right, God. It is good. And this is its fruit. We even brought back evidence. It is good. It is a great land. Nevertheless, but the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are by the sea on the side of the Jordan. Verse 30, then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, yeah, we should go. By all means, we should go and take possession of the land, for we will surely overcome it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go against the people, for they are too strong for us. For they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There also we saw the Nephilim. The sons of Anak are part of the Nephilim, and we became like grasshoppers in our own sight, and so we were in their sight. Again, you guys know the story. Here they go, they check out the land. Let's just see what God's promises are like. We want to get boots on the ground. Again, I look at my life and I'm like, how many times have I been like, God, I wish you would just tell me what you're going to do. I wish you'd give me some direction. I'm so confused. I don't know where I'm supposed to be going right now, in leading my ministry and leading my family. And I know you guys have been in that position. God, I wish you would just at least give me, 4 or 5 years ahead so I kind of know what to expect. There are some things I've had to deal with that it is so good I didn't know ahead of time. Because I probably would have thrown in the towel before it even started. Right? Like, we want to know what God's going to do, but sometimes if we know what God was going to do, we wouldn't do it. And here they are. They say, hey, we want to check out the land. We want a little Jesus GPS. What route are we going to take? And they saw it was good. And they also saw there was a big enemy. And they said, we're not going to do it. Joshua and Caleb kind of argue with them and argue with the people, say, no, we should go. God said he would do it. It's God's work. Kind of like Moses arguing with God. God's like, I'm going to do it, Moses. You don't have to do it. Caleb and Joshua are like, God's going to do it. God promised. But the people are like, no, we can't do it. And they start accusing God of being evil, of God of taking them, into this place to destroy them, and that they should be, going back to Egypt. They even say, let's get another leader. And as this is happening, and Caleb and Joshua are trying to convince them to go, the people start getting together and they start picking up stones to stone Caleb and Joshua. Verse 10 of Numbers 14, it said, but all the congregation said, stone them with stones. Let's kill the ones who want to do what God asked us to do. Kill them. Then the glory of the Lord appeared in the tent of meeting to all the sons of Israel. So they're ready to throw stones at Caleb and Joshua, and all of a sudden the glory of the Lord comes in the tent of meeting. And this is where we get our question. The Lord said to Moses, how long? How long will this people despise me? Some translations say spurn me, be disrespectful to me. How long? How long? In God's mind, there's a goal in mind. How long are they going to be disrespectful? How long are they going to despise me? How long are they going to spurn me? How long? And I was thinking about this. I was like, well, what was the people's problem? I mean, God's asking the how long question to Moses. What was the people's problem? I think I always thought the people's problem was fear, right? Fear. Or the people's problem was they lost focus on the goal, the land. But I actually don't think the problem was fear, and the problem wasn't losing focus on the goal, the land. That wasn't the problem. The reason I say it's not the problem is if you look down at verse 39, God's kind of given them some consequences. They're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. But it's interesting, verse 39 of chapter 14, it says, Moses spoke these words to the people, and the people mourned greatly. Verse 40, in the morning, however, they rose up early, went up to the ridge of the hill country, saying, here we are, we've sinned. Okay, they kind of confess. But we will go up to the place which the Lord promised. They're like, we messed up, we screwed up, we're so sorry, Moses, but now we're ready. Now we're gonna do it. Now we're gonna charge into the land, no fear, let's go, let's get it. They say, we're gonna go into the land that the Lord promised, verse 41, but Moses said, why then are you transgressing the commandment of the Lord when it will not succeed? Do not go up, or you will be struck down before your enemies, for the Lord is not among you. For the Amalekites and the Canaanites will be there in front of you, and you will fall by the sword, inasmuch as you have turned back from following the Lord, and the Lord will not be with you. Verse 44, but they went up heedlessly to the ridge of the hill country. Neither the ark of the covenant of the Lord nor Moses left the camp. Then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and struck them and beat them down as far as Hormah. It's interesting because, I think I would have grown up saying, yeah, their problem was fear. Fear of the enemy, fear of the people in the land. Their problem was they didn't want to get into the land. They didn't want to finish the job. But actually, I don't think that's the problem, because they decide they're going to do it. All right, we screwed up. We were afraid. We didn't go in. But now we're not afraid. We're going to go in. And God says the same thing. You're being rebellious. That's not what I asked for. You see, so often in the Christian life, and I see this, especially I think of specifically with these guys who are struggling with porn, or whatever other addiction, or whatever they're wrestling through. There's this wrestling, like on one moment, they're like beat down and feel like nothing's working out, and woe is me, I can't handle this. And the next moment, they're like, we're ready to charge it. I'm gonna take this thing on. And where's the focus? Both ways. It's here. Me. The first one, this giant is too big for me. I looked at the giant, I looked at the people in the land, I looked at myself, and I was way too small. Focus is on me. Second one, I looked at myself, and yeah, I screwed up, but this time I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna charge, I'm gonna make it work. And both times God's like, no. So what was the problem? If it wasn't fear, if it wasn't like a lack of focus on getting to the land, what was the problem? To understand the problem, you have to understand what is the how long pointing towards. Remember, how long has a goal in mind, a destination in mind. When my kids were driving somewhere and they say, how long, they mean how long till we get there. So when God says, how long, what is he hoping for? What's the destination that they're not reaching? What's the goal? Do you know what the goal was? Do you know what the destination was when God brought Israel out of Egypt? Where was he bringing them? We'd say, well, to the promised land. That was a goal, but it wasn't the primary goal. What was God's goal in bringing people out of Egypt? I love this. Look at Exodus chapter 19, verse 4. Exodus 19:4. I'm going to start in verse 3. He says, Moses went up to God, and the Lord called him from the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the sons of Israel, verse 4, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to where? To myself. You saw how I brought you out of Egypt. I did what I did to the Egyptians, how I bore you on eagle's wings. I picked you up like you were on top of these eagle's wings. Where did I bring you? I brought you to myself. That was the goal. Canaan is a result of living in the goal. Living in him, living with God, walking with God, he was bringing them to Canaan. But if you lose sight of the goal, if you make the goal Canaan and don't come to God, you don't get into Canaan. The goal was God, that the people would be brought to himself. It's interesting because actually Moses got this. A couple pages forward from that, Exodus 33, Israel has just made the golden calf. They've made these horrible decisions. God is angry. He's actually ready to destroy the people. And God says this to Moses. It's interesting. Chapter 33 of Exodus, verse 1, he says, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses and says, 'Depart, go up from here, you and the people whom you have brought up from the land of Egypt, to the land which I swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying to your descendants, I will give it to you.'" So he's like, okay, you guys just go to the land. He says, "I will send an angel before you, and I will drive out the Canaanites and the Amorites and the Hittites and the Perizzites, the Hivites and the Jebusites." So he says, go to the land. You just go. I'll send an angel with you. The angel can help. Verse 3, "Go up to the land flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go up with you in your midst, because you are an obstinate people, and I might destroy you on the way." So tell you what, if you want the goal to be Canaan, why don't you just go? I'll send an angel. He can take care of business. Look at verse 15, Moses' response. He said to him, Moses says to God, "If your presence does not go with us, do not lead us up from here." God, if you're not going to be with us, then don't lead us up from here. Because God's goal, his purpose, was himself, was a relationship with God, and that they would go into the land together. Flipping back to Numbers chapter 14, the second "how long" that he mentions there points to this aspect. Numbers 14, first he says, "How long will this people spurn me or despise me? And how long will they not believe in me?" Not believe in me. And of course we know this. We know this. But to be honest, we get confused in everyday life. Because we look at the things in front of us, we look at the challenges in front of us, and we can get so fixated on the goal, on a goal that's not actually God's goal. We can get so fixated on a task, on something that we're hoping to complete, maybe something God's even given us and called us to, and all of a sudden that's become the focus of our lives, and we're all about getting that done. And we don't even know how to do it. We don't know where we're going, and so we do all sorts of different things, and we stress and we work, and the whole time is God saying, "Hey, what about me? That was where I was taking you, but the goal is me. I will go with you. I'm the goal." Even as I was preparing last night, looking back over my notes on this session and this morning, and some of you guys, if you're teachers, you've been here. I assume I'm here all the time. Sometimes you'll think you've got things together, and all of a sudden it doesn't make sense. All of a sudden you're like, I thought it made sense. I thought it was connecting. And there's sometimes where teachings just come together. You're like, oh man, it's just like, I didn't even have to write it. It just landed on my page. And other times you're like, wrestle with it. And as I was thinking through this, it just was like not connecting and not working. And if you've ever had like a deadline and you're like, need to get them, like, time is running out. Like, I can't pause time and keep working. It's coming, and I'm stressing, and I'm worried. And I teach for a job, and I freak out every time I come up. And I'm sitting there, and I'm stressing out. And again, it's so good when you're teaching something and then actually start listening to what you're teaching yourself. And it was like God was saying, Dan, what do you think the goal is here? Is it the teaching? I'm like, yeah, that's why they asked me to come. Yeah, that's where we're going. But that's not the goal. If my teaching becomes the goal, then all of a sudden I start building into what I think that teaching is supposed to be like. We played a video clip at the beginning from my grandpa. It's challenging growing up in a family where everybody knows your grandpa. My mom's dad is Torchbearers, who was a part of the Billy Graham Association, kind of started that. So if I was on the East Coast, in the South, everybody knew that grandpa. And if I was around Torchbearers, everybody knew my other grandpa. And there was this like internal pressure. And so if my focus is my teaching, all of a sudden I start getting an expectation of what it's supposed to look like and how it's supposed to work and the lives that are supposed to be changed and all these things, which are all good things. They're great things. But all of a sudden, something that's not meant to be the goal has become the goal, and it stresses me out. Or I do what Israel did the first time and say, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. It's too much stress. I can't do it. And God's like, Dan, the goal is me. The goal is me. It doesn't matter how it works out. Trust me. You may not even think it went well. That's okay. The goal is me. There's great speakers around the world that have nothing to do with Jesus. I mean, there's some amazing comedians. You know, they could be up here. You guys would be on the edge of your seat. It'd be awesome. Is it life-changing? Is it God's work? No. The goal is Him. As I walk with these students struggling with addictions, specifically as I talked about, like pornography, and they're trying to figure out what's the solution, what do I do? And they go from this one side feeling in total defeat, and then the next day, like, I'm gonna get it this time. And I'm like, how do I give them advice? Because there are some like practical things, like there's some realities. Like you probably should maybe put some guards on your computer. You probably should, not in private at night when you're hungry and tired, start scanning the internet. Like there's some practical things that just make sense. But that's not going to solve the problem. Because the problem is much deeper than that. What's the goal? And I've learned and I'm learning to say, you know what? You got to look to Jesus. And I can't guarantee you're going to deal with this addiction. Maybe ever. One day, you will see Him and you will be like Him. That's what Scripture promises. One day, you will see Christ. You will see Him and you will be like Him. And that addiction is going to be gone. I hope you can, kind of figure it out with the Lord. I hope that you can get past that here in this world, because I know there's consequences to that. But you know what? When Jesus died on the cross for you, He made you holy, blameless, and beyond reproach. You are not identified by that sin anymore. Yes, you wrestle through it. Yes, you should be coming to the Lord. How do I work through this? But God wants you to be with Him. I remember in college having a sin of lust that I'd been wrestling with since I was like probably 10. I mean, years and years. And it had had its ups and its downs. It had had the time when it like held my life and the times when I felt like pretty confident, like I'm dealing with this thing. I had had the times where I was like Israel, saying, I can't beat this giant. It's too big for me, and I've tried, and I can't do it. And I had the times where I'm like, I'm running, and I'm taking this thing on. But there was always the up and down. There's always going back. And I remember one day as I'd struggled in this area of lust, and I was so angry at myself, and I was so frustrated at myself because I didn't reach my goal, which is a good goal. Like, it's a godly thing. Like, I don't want to do this, but I was angry at myself, and I was taking a walk, and I was at Bible school, and I remember taking this walk, and I'm like, God, I'm so sorry. And my plan was, I'm just going to take this, like, kind of penance walk. Like, I'm going to go and I'm going to cry out to God. I'm going to tell him how sad I am and how horrible I am and how I'm going to work better next time. And, I'm kind of doing this thing. And I start walking like, oh, Lord, I'm so sorry. Oh, Lord, kind of go on this thing. And I began thinking about the gospel. I thought, this doesn't feel very victorious. I don't feel like I'm living the victorious Christian life right now. I mean, I'm talking to God, I'm seeking him, but I feel like I'm under Satan's thumb. And he's squeezing me with what I've been doing. And I began thinking about that sin, and I began, Satan's over here saying, yeah, I can't believe you did that. And I started thinking, you know what? Jesus died for that already. Like, that's why he went to the cross. In Christ, I'm holy, blameless, and beyond reproach. He died for that. In fact, I have an opportunity right now that I didn't have 10 minutes ago before I sinned. Right now, I have the opportunity to come to the Lord and thank him for the forgiveness of that just there. And I remember I'm walking and I'm like, oh, yeah, but I should just kind of grieve a little bit more and make sure he knows how sad I am, as if somehow that will get me back in right standing with God. If I can beat myself up enough, he'll know I'm serious this time. That's like trying to run into Canaan without him. And I say to God, I said, God, thank you. Thank you that you died for that. And right away, the voice on the other side of my head was like, yeah, Dan, but that's not the first time this year. Oh, yeah, that's true. God, thank you that you didn't just die for this, you died for the last time. Yeah, but you've been struggling with this, Dan, since you were 10 years old. You're never going to get past it. Oh, thanks, I forgot about that. Lord, thank you that not only did you die for this time and the last time, but actually for every time I've struggled with this. And actually you love me no matter what, even if I never get past it. Thank you. Yeah, but what about your girlfriend? My wife now, Sarah. What would she think if she knew what you were thinking and what you were doing? Oh, Satan, thanks for reminding me about that one. Jesus, thank you. And I just, everything that was thrown at me, I began just turning back to Christ. Instead of focusing on myself, instead of saying, oh, I got to beat myself up, it's like, no, he rescued Israel from Egypt to himself. He rescued us through the cross to come to himself. Through life, through resurrection. And so he's like, man, what about your girlfriend, Sarah? Oh, thanks for reminding me. Jesus, thank you that not only did you die for my sin in the past, my sin in the future, but you also died for the fact that I'm, hiding this, or my girlfriend doesn't know. And that's like lust, which is like adultery. And, oh, thank you. And then, yeah, but you're training to be a Bible teacher, and those middle schoolers you're teaching, you're a hypocrite. Satan, thank you. I forgot about hypocrisy. Jesus, thank you that you died for my hypocrisy. And I just, as I was going, I began taking everything that was thrown at me and turning it back to Christ and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was one of the most worshipful experiences I've ever had. And these attacks started slowing down. I mean, they were coming fast at first. But as I turned my eyes to Christ, the one for whom he saved me, I began to feel freedom. I began to walk in freedom. Not minimizing my sin. I don't want you to think I'm minimizing my sin. I'm actually maximizing my sin because that's what Christ died for. But I'm also maximizing the cross. And I said, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I had a worship, no more under Satan's thumb. It was a walk of worship with the Lord as I turned my eyes to him. It was incredible because that was probably the turning point in my life with this issue of lust. There were moments still, but I began to see a change as I learned to not deal with that issue with willpower or with defeatism, but saying, I need to come to Christ. He is my life. He died for me, and he rose again to give me his life. I don't know what it is for you. I don't know what challenge is in front of you that maybe God called you to, or you think he's directing you to, and there's times that you know it becomes the primary goal. And some of them are hard. I think of raising kids, right? Raising kids. I mean, if you're a mom, who else is going to do it, right? And so it is something that God has on your plate, and yet it is either the primary goal and the center thing, and it consumes your life, or you say, I actually need, my primary goal is I need to be close to Jesus so that he can help me raise my kids. Maybe it's living with your spouse. It's hard. And you make living with your spouse, harmony with your spouse, your primary goal. If that's your primary goal, you don't know how that's, you have so little control over how she or he responds. What's the primary goal? I rescued you to be with me, to come to myself with Christ. And you deal with that together. Pastoring a church, youth, running a business, whatever it might be, learning to say, God, I don't know how this is going to work out. It's like teaching this morning. Like, I don't know how this is going to work out. And it's not like, oh, I'm coming to you, so I'm not going to prepare anymore. But it's a different heart attitude saying, God, however it works out this morning, I want to make sure I'm trusting you. That you're not saying, Dan, how long do you believe in me? You're doing all this work for me, but you're not allowing me to work through you, me to walk in relationship with you. Lord, I thank you that you have given us life. Lord, that you have freed us from sin and death, Lord, through your death on the cross. That you've declared us holy and blameless and beyond reproach because, Jesus, you are holy, blameless, and beyond reproach, and we are in you, unified, connected, identified with you and your life. Lord, help us to believe that. And I pray that whatever it is that you're calling us to, and maybe we wish we knew, maybe we wish we had a little sneak peek into the next 5 to 10 years, Lord, I pray that you only give us the ones that we can handle. Lord, I know my own weakness. I pray that rather than having a vision for where you're taking me, I'd have a vision for what it looks like to walk with you. Lord, and I pray that over this group, that, Lord, we would set as our primary goal to be with you, to walk with you. The resurrected Lord Jesus, living and active by your Holy Spirit in our life, Lord, that would be the center. And out of that, we would do all the work you have for us, resting. It's not our work. It's not our responsibility. If things don't work out, hopefully we're learning to walk with you in new ways. Lord, we thank you in your name.